This is a breathtaking spectacle of SpaceX's Dragon landing, a testament to human ingenuity and cutting-edge space technology. SpaceX Dragon is the best spacecraft now, but what if Dragon's parachutes fail and plummet straight into the ocean at 300 miles per hour? It would shatter into countless pieces upon impact, killing any astronauts instantly with no chance of survival and sending a tremendous shockwave across the ocean's surface. Luckily, a disaster might never happen, as Elon Musk is reviving propulsive landing for Dragon, an idea shelved a decade ago. So what exactly is this method, and can it fully replace parachute landings? Let's dive in and find out on today's episode of Alpha Tech. Parachutes have long been a trusted solution for spacecraft landings, ensuring a controlled and safe descent from extreme speeds. They have proven effective in countless missions, from Apollo to modern Dragon capsules. But despite their reliability, parachutes still come with major drawbacks. They are vulnerable, require complex deployment systems, and can fail under harsh conditions. History has seen multiple incidents where parachute malfunctions led to catastrophic landing failures. For example, during the Soyuz 1 mission in 1967, the spacecraft suffered a critical failure when both the primary and reserve parachutes failed to deploy during re-entry. This resulted in a tragic accident that claimed the life of cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov, highlighting serious issues in parachute design and quality control within the aerospace industry. Or, in 2004, NASA's Genesis probe was returning to Earth with valuable solar wind samples, but its parachutes failed to deploy. Instead of a controlled landing, it crashed into the Utah desert at high speed. A design flaw in the parachute system nearly cost years of research, but luckily scientists were able to recover key data despite the damage. In recent years, with commercial space flights becoming more common, landing safety has become a bigger concern than ever, and SpaceX has been leading the charge, working to upgrade the parachute system for the Dragon spacecraft. But that doesn't mean they haven't run into trouble with these unpredictable parachutes. For example, SpaceX reported issues during Crew Dragon parachute tests in 2019 and 2020. While these failures happened during testing and didn't put any lives at risk, they highlighted the urgent need for a backup plan in case of an emergency. This is why SpaceX is pushing a bold new idea, equipping the Dragon spacecraft with the ability to land using its own engines, as a safeguard against parachute failures. This isn't just a concept, it's a proven approach. Both Falcon 9 and Starship rely entirely on powerful rocket engines to land with precision, bypassing parachutes altogether. And what's interesting is that SpaceX actually revealed this upgrade back in 2014. They posted on X, saying, 8 SuperDraco engines on Dragon version 2 will allow the vehicle to land anywhere with the accuracy of a helicopter. That's right. The image they posted shows a pair of SuperDraco engines. These powerful thrusters were originally developed for the Crew Dragon's Launch Escape System LES, designed to propel the spacecraft away from the rocket in case of an emergency during launch. Each SuperDraco generates about 16,000 pounds of thrust, and SpaceX equipped Dragon with 8 of them, arranged in pairs at 4 locations around the spacecraft, integrated into SuperDraco pods. With a total thrust of 128,000 pounds force, 4 SuperDraco pods can accelerate Dragon at 6 to 10 G in just a few seconds, more than enough to pull it out of danger. And these thrusters aren't just theory, they've already proven themselves in real tests. Back in May 2015, during the pad abort test, the SuperDracos fired perfectly, launching the Crew Dragon prototype 1,500 meters into the air in just 6 seconds before safely deploying its parachutes. Then in January 2020, during the in-flight abort test, the pods once again did their job, kicking Dragon away from a failing Falcon 9 mid-flight in a high-stakes demonstration of their life-saving capabilities. SpaceX had big plans for Crew Dragon's landing system right from the start. Because of their reliability and stability, the company originally designed the spacecraft to land vertically on solid ground, just like the Falcon 9 rocket. The idea was simple. After re-entry, Dragon would fire up its 8 SuperDraco engines, slow itself down, and come in for a smooth landing on a designated pad. This approach wasn't just about safety, it was all about speed. If it had worked out, it could have drastically cut down refurbishment time, getting Dragon turned around and back on the launch pad faster than ever. However, in 2017, the plan was abandoned due to NASA's requirement for parachute-based splashdowns, as well as technical challenges, such as the need for additional landing legs. Most importantly, SpaceX prioritized astronaut safety above all else, leading to the decision to scrap the idea. But it wasn't until recent years that this concept resurfaced. During a press conference for the Crew 9 mission in September 2024, NASA's Commercial Crew Program Manager Steve Stick confirmed, "We have a unique capability for the first time on Crew 8 and Crew 9. It's an emergency contingency capability for landing where, if the main parachutes were all to fail, the SuperDraco thrusters will fire right before the vehicle would make contact with the water. Then, it would be an emergency configuration to save the crew on a really bad day." Providing more insight into the new emergency landing feature, SpaceX Vice President of Build and Flight Reliability, William Gerstenmaier, stated, "We've actually flown it on several other Dragon flights before this. This is the first time it flies on a NASA mission." He adding, "Way it works is, in the case all the parachutes totally fail, this essentially fires the thrusters at the very end that essentially gives the crew a chance to land safely and essentially escape the vehicle. So it's not used in any, partial conditions." These statements make it clear that since Dragon can land safely even with just one parachute or minor chute issues, the thruster-powered emergency landing is strictly a last-ditch option for the absolute worst-case scenario when every parachute fails. Putting the landing story on pause for a moment, here's something even more interesting. Back when Dragon 2 was first announced with its SuperDraco-powered landing capability, SpaceX had an even bolder vision: landing Dragon on Mars. That's right, there was a plan called Red Dragon, and from a technical standpoint, it actually made a lot of sense. Mars has a thin atmosphere, way less dense than Earth's, which means parachutes aren't nearly as effective for slowing down a spacecraft. For Red Dragon, that wasn't a problem. The idea was to use its built-in thrusters to slow down and touch down gently on solid ground. Basically, a propulsive landing just like SpaceX had already been testing at their McGregor, Texas facility. The mission would have launched atop an upgraded version of the Falcon rocket, marking a huge step toward interplanetary exploration. However, in 2017, Musk made a major pivot. He announced that the company was scrapping plans for propulsive landings with Dragon. As I mentioned earlier, NASA had serious safety concerns, and getting the system certified for crewed missions would have been a massive challenge. It would have taken a tremendous amount of effort to qualify that for safety, particularly for crew transport, Musk explained. But there was another big reason behind the shift. By that time, Musk had already set his sights on something much bigger: a fully reusable spacecraft designed to take humans to Mars. It was called the Big F King rocket, BFR, an early version of what we now know as Starship. Furthermore, when NASA decided not to fund Red Dragon for a potential Mars sample return mission, SpaceX dropped the idea altogether. Instead, they shifted their focus to further developing Dragon 2 for missions closer to home, right here on Earth. This decision meant that Dragon capsules would continue landing on Earth using parachutes instead of the SuperDraco thrusters. Technically, the thrusters were still necessary and installed, as they played a crucial role in Dragon's in-flight abort system. However, without landing legs, actually pulling off a propulsive touchdown on solid ground would have been extremely difficult. With propulsive landings off the table, Dragon's return strategy had to rely entirely on parachutes, making ocean splashdowns the preferred solution due to their clear advantages over solid ground. Water naturally provides a much softer landing compared to solid ground, helping to minimize stress on both the spacecraft and the crew. During re-entry, the surface temperature of spacecraft like Crew Dragon or any similar vehicle can skyrocket to extreme levels, typically ranging from 1,600 degrees Celsius to 2,800 degrees Celsius. This is why, upon landing, you'll often notice that the spacecraft's white protective coating has completely burned off. Splashing down in the ocean helps dissipate this intense heat far more effectively than landing on solid ground. Another major advantage is flexibility in landing locations. Since oceans cover most of Earth's surface, water landings allow for multiple recovery zones, making mission planning and retrieval operations much easier. That's why even today, splashdowns remain one of the most widely used methods for bringing astronauts back to Earth safely. But of course, splashdowns aren't without their downsides. First, getting both the spacecraft and the crew back to shore is a complicated and time-consuming process. It requires specialized recovery ships and equipment to ensure everything is retrieved safely and efficiently. Second, exposure to seawater can cause corrosion and damage to various parts of the spacecraft. This means extra care is needed in the design, along with thorough post-recovery maintenance to minimize these effects. And then there's the weather. Of course, mission planners carefully track weather conditions and aim for ideal landing windows. But if an emergency forces a splashdown during a storm, things can get tricky. High winds and rough seas would make recovery operations much more dangerous and challenging, delaying how quickly the crew can be safely brought back. Recognizing these challenges, Sierra Space, an aerospace company based in Louisville, Colorado, is also taking a different approach with its own spacecraft, the Dreamchaser. This vehicle is Sierra Space's answer to the challenges of traditional spacecraft recovery. Inspired by NASA's space shuttle, it's designed for gentle, runway landings with re-entry forces kept under 1.5 Gs, far smoother than the intense impacts of ocean splashdowns. This makes it an adaptable and efficient vehicle for a wide range of missions. One of its biggest advantages is the ability to quickly return sensitive cargo. Scientific research, fragile instruments, and critical medical supplies can be delivered intact and ready for immediate use, unlike capsules that must endure rough water landings and extended recovery times. By leveraging existing runway infrastructure, Dreamchaser streamlines the post-mission process, reducing costs and increasing accessibility for space operations. As the industry moves toward greater reusability and efficiency, this innovative spaceplane could play a major role in shaping the future of commercial spaceflight and orbital logistics. That said, if we compare Dragon and Dreamchaser today, Dragon is still the far more proven and reliable spacecraft. With over 40 successful missions to the ISS, both cargo and crew, Dragon has built a solid track record, while Dreamchaser is still stuck in the development phase. Landing is just one piece of the puzzle. What truly matters is a spacecraft's overall reliability, stability, and safety. And in that regard, Dragon has already proven itself time and time again. Launching cargo and crew dozens of times and being reused up to 5 times might seem routine from SpaceX's perspective. However, this is something that competitors like Boeing's Starliner won't be able to achieve for at least another 5 years. That's why NASA chose SpaceX's Dragon to rescue the 2 Starliner astronauts stranded in space. Now that the mission has been completed, I believe this is the perfect time to explore Dragon's unique technical capabilities and how SpaceX has outclassed its competitors. Dragon is not only a flagship spacecraft for SpaceX, but also a cornerstone of the U.S. space industry. With such a prestigious title, Dragon has never failed to impress. Since its debut, it has set multiple records for SpaceX, including the first crewed flight to the ISS launched from U.S. soil in nearly a decade, the first private crewed mission featuring a civilian in space, and the first spacecraft with near-total reusability since the space shuttle era. One might wonder which spacecraft today could achieve such feats: Soyuz, Starliner, or perhaps even Orion, but none have managed to match Dragon's accomplishments. While Dreamchaser aims for reusability, it has yet to fly. So far, SpaceX's Crew Dragon has completed 16 crewed missions, carrying 60 astronauts into Earth's orbit. The Dragon program is thriving, with flights occurring more frequently than originally planned due to Boeing's repeated Starliner delays. This underscores Crew Dragon's growing significance and its necessity for all government-funded human spaceflight missions. Most recently, Crew Dragon successfully rescued 2 Starliner astronauts after nearly 9 months in space. This mission further demonstrated the spacecraft's reliability, earning universal recognition for its capabilities. Even nature seemed to celebrate the moment. As seen in live broadcasts, dolphins were spotted swimming around the Dragon capsule after it splashed down, almost as if welcoming it back. So after all this, what groundbreaking innovations have allowed Dragon to achieve such success? These very advancements are what enable SpaceX to maintain Dragon's dominance over its competitors. First and foremost, Crew Dragon's autonomous docking technology is a game-changing feature that marks a transformative shift in how humans approach space exploration. Unlike predecessors, such as the Space Shuttle, which relied heavily on astronaut piloting skills for rendezvous and docking, or earlier cargo vehicles like the Progress and Dragon 1 that depended on the International Space Station's Canadarm2 for berthing, Crew Dragon redefines the paradigm with a fully automated system. This capability leverages an advanced sensor suite, including LiDAR for precise distance and shape mapping, infrared cameras for thermal tracking in varying light conditions, and GPS for positional accuracy, allowing the spacecraft to align and connect with the ISS's docking port with surgical precision. The result is a seamless, hands-off process that has been likened to a self-parking car, but executed at 17,500 miles per hour in the unforgiving vacuum of space. This autonomy shines in its practical benefits. Offloading the docking task from astronauts or ground crews slashes the cognitive and operational burden during critical mission phases. For instance, during Demo 2 in May 2020, astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley monitored the system but didn't need to intervene as Crew Dragon flawlessly latched onto the ISS's Harmony module. This reduction in workload isn't just about convenience, it's a safety multiplier. The system's redundancy, with multiple sensors cross-checking each other, minimizes the risk of human error or single-point failures, a stark improvement over manual methods where fatigue or misjudgment could spell disaster. Data from NASA's Commercial Crew Program highlights that the docking process, once a tense multi-hour ordeal, now unfolds in under 30 minutes from final approach to hard mate, a testament to the technology's efficiency and reliability. What makes this especially intriguing is that autonomous docking is a stepping stone to fully independent space missions, where human presence or real-time control from Earth might be impractical. Consider deep space scenarios like lunar orbit or Mars transit. Communication delays of up to 24 minutes round trip to the Red Planet mean ground teams can't guide a spacecraft in real time. Crew Dragon's proven ability to navigate and dock without oversight, demonstrated again in the Crew 8 mission in March 2024, offers a blueprint for future craft destined for the Moon, Mars, or beyond. SpaceX has hinted at adapting this tech for Starship, which could autonomously link with orbital fuel depots or Martian habitats, amplifying its relevance for Elon Musk's interplanetary ambitions. The next unique and significant thing is Dragon's reusability and cost-effectiveness. Unlike the disposable spacecraft of the past, both Cargo Dragon and Crew Dragon are engineered to return to Earth intact, be refurbished, and fly again. This paradigm shift slashes the financial barriers that have long constrained space exploration, turning what was once a single-use luxury into a repeatable, almost routine operation. The space community, from NASA administrators to private sector visionaries, can't help but take notice as SpaceX demonstrates that reusability isn't just a buzzword. It's a viable path to making spaceflight more accessible and economically sustainable. Take the Cargo Dragon's track record. The Dragon C-108 capsule, for example, first launched on the CRS-6 mission in April 2015, delivering over 4,000 pounds of supplies to the ISS before splashing down in the Pacific. After refurbishment, it flew again on CRS-13 in December 2017, proving that a spacecraft could withstand the rigors of launch, re-entry, and ocean recovery, then do it all over again. This wasn't a one-off stunt. SpaceX has since normalized the practice. By March 2025, multiple Cargo Dragon capsules have logged 3 or more flights, with Crew Dragon joining the trend. Endurance, for instance, completed its 4th crewed mission in late 2024. Each reuse cuts costs dramatically. While a new Dragon might cost upwards of $100 million to build, refurbishing one for relaunch is estimated at a fraction of that, perhaps $30 to $40 million, factoring in inspections, component swaps, and recertification. Compared to the shuttle's $1.5 billion per flight price tag, adjusted for inflation, Dragon's economics are a revelation. This reusability doesn't just save money, it redefines mission planning. NASA's Commercial Resupply Services contracts once assumed a steady stream of new spacecraft. Now, SpaceX can bid lower by leveraging a fleet of proven veterans. The CRS-28 mission in 2023, flown by a thrice-used Cargo Dragon, delivered science payloads for less than half the per-kilogram cost of its disposable predecessors, according to SpaceX's own cost breakdowns. This thriftiness has analysts buzzing. Could reusable spacecraft drop launch costs below $10 million per flight someday, opening space to universities, startups, or even spacefaring nations on tight budgets? But that is not enough. The implications stretch beyond dollars. Reusability aligns with sustainability goals that captivate environmentally conscious space advocates. Single-use spacecraft litter ocean graves or burn up on re-entry, but Dragon splashdowns, guided by parachutes and recovered by ships, preserve hardware for future use, reducing waste. The space community, long criticized for its ecological footprint, sees in Dragon a model for greener spaceflight. Yet it's not without trade-offs. Refurbishment requires meticulous inspection of heat shields, avionics, and pressure vessels, a process SpaceX has streamlined but never fully detailed publicly. Crew Dragon's SuperDraco engines and launch escape system, LES, are the following impressive elements. The SuperDraco-powered LES is integrated directly into the Crew Dragon's hull, featuring 8 hypergolic engines arranged in pairs around the capsule's base. Each SuperDraco delivers a jaw-dropping 16,000 pounds of thrust, enabling the spacecraft to rocket away from a disintegrating Falcon 9 in under 2 seconds, reaching speeds of over 500 miles per hour almost instantly. This isn't just a safety feature, it's a visceral, adrenaline-pumping marvel that redefines how we protect astronauts, making it a magnet for space enthusiasts and engineers alike. The system's design offers a stark contrast to its predecessors. Older LES setups, like those on Mercury, Apollo, or even Russia's Soyuz, relied on detachable towers or modules that activated only during specific launch phases, jettisoning once the rocket cleared the danger zone. Crew Dragon's SuperDracos, however, remain active throughout the ascent, providing an anytime, anywhere escape capability from pad to orbit. This was proven in the January 2020 in-flight abort test, where a Crew Dragon blasted away from a deliberately detonated Falcon 9 at max Q, the point of maximum aerodynamic stress, splashing down safely 19 miles off Florida's coast. The test showcased a level of protection unmatched by the shuttle, which lacked an escape system post-launch, a vulnerability tragically exposed during Challenger's 1986 disaster. With SuperDracos, SpaceX ensures astronauts have a lifeline no matter the failure mode, be it a booster explosion or an upper stage anomaly. The journey to this reliability, though, was anything but smooth. In April 2019, during a static fire test of the SuperDracos at Cape Canaveral, a catastrophic anomaly turned a Crew Dragon test article into a fireball, delaying the program and raising doubts about the engine's readiness. SpaceX traced the failure to a leaky valve, allowing nitrogen tetroxide to mix prematurely with monomethylhydrazine, hypergolic propellants that ignite on contact, causing an explosion. The fix? A redesigned valve system and rigorous retesting culminated in the 2020 triumph. How SpaceX transformed a smoldering setback into a system NASA certified for human flight is a masterclass in problem-solving under pressure. That is also something not every space company has the courage to pursue. The final unique capability that only SpaceX's Dragon can achieve is its role in stabilizing and adjusting the International Space Station. On November 8, 2024, we saw the Cargo Dragon's Draco thrusters fire for 12.5 minutes, nudging the ISS's orbit higher by 370 feet at apogee and 3,700 feet at perigee. Historically, such reboosts, necessary to counteract the orbital decay caused by atmospheric drag, were the domain of Russia's Progress spacecraft or Northrop Grumman's Cygnus. From this mission, we can see Dragon's ability to adjust the altitude of the ISS, raising it by increments measured in tenths of a mile, demonstrates a dual-purpose versatility that sets Dragon apart. Traditionally a workhorse for crew and cargo transport, delivering over 6,000 pounds of supplies in its CRS-31 mission just days before the reboost, Dragon now doubles as an orbital maintenance tool. This capability reduces NASA's reliance on foreign partners like Roscosmos, whose Progress spacecraft have long been the ISS's primary tugboat. With geopolitical tensions simmering since Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Dragon's new role offers strategic flexibility, ensuring the U.S. can independently sustain the ISS's orbit through at least 2030. But the real game changer lies in what comes next: Dragon's starring role in the ISS's grand finale. NASA's $843 million contract with SpaceX, awarded in July 2024, tasks the company with building the U.S. deorbit vehicle, USDV, a beefed-up Dragon variant designed to guide the 925,000-pound station to a controlled demise in the early 2030. Unlike the current Cargo Dragon, which uses 16 Draco thrusters, the USDV will sport 46, 30 dedicated to deorbit burns, packing 6 times the propellant and 3 to 4 times the power of its siblings. This souped-up Dragon on steroids will dock at the ISS's forward port, linger for up to 18 months as the station's orbit naturally decays, then execute a series of precise burns to steer it into a 2,000-kilometer-long oceanic graveyard, likely the South Pacific's Point Nemo. The November reboost provided critical data for this mission, validating Dragon's thruster performance under real orbital conditions, a dress rehearsal for the USDV's Herculean task. Deorbiting the ISS, a football field-sized behemoth traveling at 17,100 miles per hour, demands precision to ensure surviving fragments, from microwave-sized chunks to sedan-scale debris, hit an unpopulated target. The USDV's 35,000 pounds of propellant and 10,000 newtons of thrust must wrestle with atmospheric drag and structural torques, a challenge Sarah Walker, SpaceX's Dragon mission management director, called complex and critical. Spacesuits are an essential tool for space travel. Typically, each astronaut uses a single type of spacesuit throughout their entire mission to and from the ISS. However, for astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, things were different. They had the unique opportunity to experience both of today's most advanced spacesuits: Boeing's Blue Starliner suit and SpaceX's Starman suit. So, what did the astronauts have to say about SpaceX's spacesuit after being rescued by Dragon? And which suit truly leads the future of space exploration? Perhaps many people don't know that the spacesuits for the rescue mission of the two Starliner astronauts posed a logistical challenge when SpaceX stepped in. Each spacecraft has unique technical specifications, and in this case, the Boeing spacesuits were incompatible with Crew Dragon's internal systems. Specifically, the umbilical connections, flexible tubes that provide air and cooling to the spacesuits, had different connection standards and ports, making a direct transfer impossible. As a result, the astronauts had to switch to SpaceX-specific spacesuits, adding another layer of complexity to their already extended mission. From this experience, astronauts Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore had the opportunity to try out an extraordinary space product that left them in awe. So, to understand how the astronauts felt when experiencing both suits in the same mission, we first need to grasp some fundamental concepts about the types of spacesuits commonly used in space. Spacesuits are critical pieces of equipment tailored to meet the demands of specific activities in space, with intravehicular activity IVA suits and extravehicular activity EVA suits representing the two main categories. IVA suits are engineered for use inside a pressurized spacecraft, primarily during the launch, flight, and re-entry phases. Their main role is to act as a safeguard in emergencies, such as a sudden loss of cabin pressure or drastic temperature shifts. These suits prioritize comfort and flexibility, allowing astronauts to move easily within the confined quarters of a spacecraft while performing essential tasks. They are lightweight and minimally bulky, featuring pressure sealing capabilities, basic thermal protection, and, in modern iterations, touchscreen-compatible gloves for operating spacecraft controls. In contrast, EVA suits are built for the unforgiving conditions of spacewalks, where astronauts venture outside their spacecraft for tasks like repairs, scientific experiments, or planetary exploration. These suits serve as standalone life support systems, protecting wearers from extreme temperatures, radiation, micrometeoroids, and the vacuum of space. Their bulkier, multi-layered construction includes integrated oxygen supplies, temperature regulation, high-mobility joints, and advanced gloves for precise tool use, along with helmets featuring visors and communication systems. NASA's Extravehicular Mobility Unit, EMU, used for International Space Station spacewalks, and SpaceX's Polaris Dawn EVA suit, designed for deep space missions, exemplify the robust engineering required for survival outside a spacecraft. As for Boeing's Blue Starliner suit and SpaceX's Starman suit, both fall under the IVA category, as they are only worn within the spacecraft. First, let's talk about Boeing's Starliner spacesuit, distinguished by its signature blue color. Boeing first unveiled its spacesuits in 2017, with features including wraparound glass in the helmet and touchscreen-sensitive gloves. The overall suit is intended to be lighter and more flexible through the use of advanced materials and new joint patterns, NASA officials wrote at the time. Launch and entry suits worn by space shuttle crews tended to run about 30 pounds, 13.7 kilograms, while Boeing's version is only 20 pounds, 9 kilograms. Aside from the jointed gloves, other flexibility features Starliner astronauts enjoy include movable materials in the elbows and knees, along with strategically located zippers, NASA wrote. The astronauts are enjoying the flexibility. "I really like these suits," Williams said during a press conference on March 22nd. "We worked with the company David Clark through Boeing to get the suits squared away for us. I think they're really nice." Space shuttle astronauts like Williams and Wilmore wore a few varieties of interior spacesuits over the decades. Early 1981 to 2 missions, STS-1 through STS-4, used a launch entry suit LES, derived from a high-pressure suit worn by U.S. Air Force pilots in the mid-1970s. The current Starliner suit has 5 sizes available. Each crew member is carefully measured, and then the relevant pieces for their bodies can be swapped in for the best comfort and safety. As for the integrated boots, there are 10 sizes to put on your foot, all developed with San Antonio shoemakers. According to Tori Wills Pedrati, Boeing's Starliner spacesuit lead, the real game changer is the visor. It has a really extreme field of view. When you're inside the suit, you can turn your head completely from side to side and see all the way around here. So the field of view from this visor is quite amazing. This integrated visor provides astronauts with a much broader view compared to past suits, which had restricted visibility due to bulkier helmet designs. The Starliner suit has gloves optimized for touchscreen operation, strategically placed vents to regulate temperature and pressure, and a simplified control system featuring only 2 essential valves in the belly area. These advancements make Boeing's Starliner spacesuit one of the most promising designs for future space missions. However, Boeing isn't stopping here. After the current version flies aboard the crew flight test, a new iteration by ILC Dover will replace it, introducing even further advancements in its suit technology. That sounds great, but in reality, the spacesuit commonly used by SpaceX is far more advanced. It not only meets technical requirements, but also excels in aesthetics. SpaceX's Starman IVA suit is a striking blend of lightweight construction and futuristic flair. Purpose-built for astronauts aboard the Crew Dragon spacecraft, this suit stands out not just for its functionality, but also for its bold departure from the clunky utilitarian designs of traditional intravehicular activity IVA suits. The suit's design owes much to Jose Fernandez, a Hollywood costume designer known for crafting iconic looks in films like Batman v Superman and Captain America: Civil War. His influence is evident in the Starman suit's sleek, minimalist all-white aesthetic, which mirrors the modern interior of the Crew Dragon. Unlike the bulky NASA and Russian IVA suits of the past, this design evokes the image of a movie hero rather than a traditional astronaut, aligning with SpaceX's vision of making spaceflight feel both accessible and aspirational. It's a visual statement as much as a functional tool, reimagining what a spacesuit can be. Functionality is where the Starman suit truly shines, addressing long-standing issues with older IVA designs. Traditional suits often suffered from a balloon effect, feeling stiff and inflated when pressurized, but the Starman suit counters this with enhanced flexibility at key joints like the shoulders, elbows, wrists, hips, and knees. Its life support systems are cleverly integrated, with pressurization, air circulation, and cooling streamlined into the thigh area, rather than relying on cumbersome external valves. The inclusion of touchscreen-sensitive gloves further enhances its utility, allowing astronauts to interact precisely with Crew Dragon's digital control panels, a feature tailored to the spacecraft's high-tech environment. The suit proved its worth during the Crew Dragon Demo 2 mission in May 2020, the first crewed flight to the International Space Station by SpaceX. Astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, both NASA veterans, lauded its comfort and tailored fit after wearing it in space. "I bet you we've donned and offed those suits a couple hundred times," Hurley said. Because the spacesuits were fitted to the astronauts' individual body types, Hurley added, they were actually much easier to get in and out of in zero-G, or weightlessness, compared to the pumpkin suits, which were also called the Advanced Crew Escape Suit, ACES. ACES and SpaceX's Starman spacesuits are not designed for spacewalks, just for backup during launches and landings. "We'd have to get the suits a 5-star rating," Behnken added during the discussion about the SpaceX suits. One of the things that was important in the development of the suit was to make it easy to use, something that the crew just literally has to plug in when they sit down, and the suit takes care of things from there, said Chris Trigg, SpaceX's spacesuits and crew equipment manager. But that's only part of what SpaceX has done with its spacesuit. Beyond that, SpaceX has upgraded the Starman IVA suit into the SpaceX EVA suit, designed for extravehicular activities, EVAs or spacewalks. It is based on the familiar black and white intravehicular activity IVA spacesuit, but features key enhancements and improvements to make it lightweight and unobtrusive, while protecting astronauts in the harsh environment of outer space. New features include improved mobility through redesigned joints, a helmet with a visor-mounted display, and fabric materials that make it easier to manufacture. Although based on the IVA suit, the EVA suit's materials harden under pressure, requiring flexible bends and rotating joints to allow easier movement. It also incorporates a Faraday layer or an electrically conductive cage around the suit to shield it from external electric fields. Chris Trigg, SpaceX's Senior Director of Spacesuit Development, noted another challenge: maintaining thermal comfort for astronauts during EVAs. The suit must withstand extreme temperature variations while keeping the interior safe and comfortable to the touch. The helmet features a heads-up display, HUD, with a transparent screen. This display provides critical telemetry data to astronauts, including pressure, temperature, and relative humidity, without obstructing their vision. It also has a protective coating to ensure astronaut safety. The EVA suit visor is made of polycarbonate and is coated with copper and ITO, or indium tin oxide. These two coatings together reflect the sun away from the crew while also reflecting infrared heat back to them when they are facing deep space, said SpaceX principal spacesuit engineer Eric Krauss. In the end, the spacesuit designed for SpaceX's Dragon remains superior and more feature-rich than Boeing's Starliner suit. However, have you ever wondered why these spacesuits are not interchangeable between different spacecraft? And in emergencies like the one faced by the two Starliner astronauts, why couldn't they use Boeing's spacesuits to return home aboard Dragon? The essence of the Commercial Crew program reflects a shift in how NASA approaches spacecraft procurement, risk management, and redundancy, diverging from the agency's traditional methods. In previous eras of space exploration, NASA controlled every aspect of spacecraft development, specifying requirements, selecting contractors, and overseeing design, construction, testing, and flight operations. This hands-on model ensured precision but came with significant costs and oversight burdens. With Commercial Crew, NASA opted for a new strategy, particularly since the destination, the International Space Station, ISS, was a familiar one. Instead of micromanaging, they partially funded private companies like SpaceX and Boeing to develop spacecraft, allowing these firms to innovate and design as long as they met broad safety standards and key milestones, such as a successful crewed test flight. This approach shifted much of the financial risk away from NASA. Rather than bearing the full brunt of development costs, the agency paid fixed fees for development, test flights, and operational missions. If a contractor like Boeing or SpaceX exceeded their budget, the overrun was their responsibility, not NASA's, a stark contrast to the ballooning costs of the Space Launch System, SLS, where each Artemis rocket launch costs around $4.1 billion. For an agency long constrained by tight budgets, this model was a win. It lowered costs without compromising safety or increasing risk. For instance, the Space Shuttle costs about $1.5 billion per flight, while NASA now pays SpaceX just $65 million per Commercial Crew flight. Though the shuttle could carry up to 7 astronauts and Crew Dragon has the same capacity, NASA contracts limit it to 4 per mission, a detail worth revisiting, but the cost savings remain dramatic, freeing up resources for broader agency goals. Beyond economics, Commercial Crew aimed to spark innovation. NASA encouraged private companies to bring fresh ideas and approaches, leveraging their business agility, though Boeing's recent struggles suggest this wasn't always a success. The Space Shuttle, by the 2000s, relied on 1970s-era flight software, a relic of legacy technology. Commercial Crew sought to break from that mold, inviting modern solutions. NASA provided a framework of technical requirements focused on system safety, spacecraft control, and crew survival, including mandates for abort systems, manual overrides, and pressurized launch and entry suits. Notably absent was a requirement for cross-compatibility between the suits used by Crew Dragon and Starliner, a seeming oversight that actually ties into NASA's risk strategy. Boeing's Starliner project is one of the most wasteful investments NASA has ever undertaken. After more than 10 years of development and a $4.6 billion investment, it remains stuck in the testing phase. SpaceX's Dragon even had to step in to fix the mess it left behind, bringing back 2 of their astronauts. Badly, NASA is still burning through its budget on this vehicle, with yet another crew mission scheduled for mid-year. Will this be NASA's worst decision ever? Despite the failed crewed test flight of the CST-100 Starliner on June 5, 2024, and Boeing's $2 billion loss in developing this spacecraft, NASA is still moving forward. The agency is now evaluating options for another test flight before allowing Starliner to begin regular missions to the ISS. More specifically, during a press conference after SpaceX's Crew Dragon wrapped up the Crew 9 mission on March 18th, Steve Stick, NASA's Commercial Crew Program Manager, confirmed that the agency is planning another Starliner test flight, possibly this year. Whether it will carry crew or not is still up in the air, but it has to happen before Starliner can start regular crew rotation missions to the ISS. He said, "What we'd like to do is that one flight and then get into a crew rotation flight," Steve added. So, the next flight up would really test all the changes we're making to the vehicle, and then the next flight beyond that, we really need to get Boeing into a crew rotation. So, that's the strategy. And this is where the debate begins. One side argues that if Starliner continues to be developed and tested, it could eventually succeed, giving NASA another crew transport option and reducing reliance on Russia's Soyuz or SpaceX's Dragon. On the flip side, critics argue that after years of delays, technical problems, and billions in extra costs, pushing Starliner forward at this point is just throwing good money after bad, especially when SpaceX's Crew Dragon is already out there doing the job reliably and for way less. Actually, the debate over this has been going on for a while. Last year, Elon Musk openly shared his strong opinion on Starliner's issues, tweeting, "There is no logical purpose to Starliner, given that NASA plans to deorbit space station in 5 years." If you don't know the full story, Musk's comment might seem like an unreasonable criticism. But now, let's rewind to the early days of Starliner and Dragon. By looking back, we'll understand why Musk said what he did, and more importantly, why NASA is still determined to push Boeing's spacecraft forward. In 2011, after retiring the Space Shuttle program, NASA launched the Commercial Crew Program, aiming to fund private companies to develop spacecraft for transporting astronauts to the ISS. Then, Boeing and SpaceX jumped into the game. Back in 2014, NASA handed out big contracts. Boeing got $4.6 billion to build Starliner, while SpaceX got only $2.6 billion for Crew Dragon. Why the difference? As we know, even though SpaceX got $2 billion less than Boeing, they absolutely delivered. It's been 15 years since its first launch, and their spacecraft has flown to the ISS over 40 times, carrying both crew and cargo on the Falcon rocket. Pretty impressive, right? In contrast, with all that massive funding, Boeing has only managed 3 test flights so far. After all those years and all that money, they've fallen far behind SpaceX. More than a decade of effort, yet Starliner still isn't certified for regular crew missions. Yeah, that's probably why Musk isn't happy about Starliner. I mean, the ISS is set to shut down by 2030, so if they keep pouring money into it, the next 5 years could just be a waste of cash. As of July 2024, NASA's already handed Boeing $2.7 billion out of the $4.6 billion contract, and with each trip carrying 4 people to the ISS costing around $300 million, the remaining $1.9 billion could easily cover 6 trips up there. A much smarter way to spend the money than pouring more into endless Starliner test flights. But remember the $2 billion loss I mentioned earlier? A big chunk of that comes from years of technical issues and failed test flights, which have only added to the delays and cost overruns. First, on December 20th, 2019, Starliner's first uncrewed test flight failed due to a software glitch that burned too much fuel, preventing it from reaching the ISS. Though it landed safely, the mission was still considered a failure. And that failure came at a steep cost. Boeing reported a $410 million loss in Q4 2019 to fix the issues and fund a second test flight. Next, OFT-2 successfully launched in May 2022, with Starliner finally docking at the ISS. However, after the mission, Boeing discovered minor issues with the thrusters and software, requiring further repairs and inspections. While it was a step forward, the cost of completing OFT-2 and addressing these issues contributed to a $195 million loss in Q3 2022, bringing the total losses at that point to $883 million. Then, in 2023, Boeing and NASA indefinitely delayed the first crewed test flight after discovering 2 major safety issues: parachute soft links that didn't meet NASA's standards and hundreds of meters of flammable tape inside the spacecraft. Fixing these problems added another $257 million to Boeing's losses. And then came the big moment, June 2024. After years of delays, Starliner finally launched its first crewed flight, CFT, with NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams on board. But the excitement didn't last long. As the spacecraft approached the ISS, problems started piling up. 5 of its 28 thrusters failed, making maneuvering tricky. And on top of that, engineers detected 5 helium leaks in the service module, affecting the pressurization system. Because of these issues, NASA decided it wasn't safe to bring the astronauts back on Starliner. Instead, they hitched a ride home on SpaceX's Crew Dragon, while Starliner made its lonely, uncrewed return to Earth on September 6, 2024. Following issues with the CST-100 Starliner, in September 2024, Musk accused the FAA of bias, claiming that the agency was far stricter with SpaceX than with Boeing, despite Starliner facing serious technical problems. He tweeted, "Amazingly, no Starliner fines for Boeing." The FAA Space Division is harassing SpaceX about nonsense that doesn't affect safety while giving a free pass to Boeing, even after NASA concluded that their spacecraft was not safe enough to bring back the astronauts. There need to be resignations from the FAA leadership. This was one of Musk's harshest criticisms of the FAA, arguing that while Boeing faced no penalties, SpaceX was being unfairly scrutinized over minor issues. Financially, things weren't looking any better for Boeing. In Q2 2024, they took a $125 million hit due to CFT delays. By Q3, that number had ballooned to $1.85 billion in total losses. And with another $148 million expected in Q4, Boeing's financial bleed was set to surpass $2 billion by early 2025. A brutal reality check, while SpaceX continued to widen the gap. This massive loss isn't extra money from NASA or part of the contract. It's cost overruns that Boeing had to cover themselves due to the fixed-price contract. So with $1.9 billion still left in the contract, NASA might just keep pushing forward with Starliner. NASA and Boeing have also laid out clear plans for the future. According to Steve Stick, the next Starliner test flight will focus on verifying that the spacecraft's propulsion system functions properly after recent adjustments. The thing that we need to solidify and go test is the prop system in the service module, he said. We need to make sure we can eliminate the helium leaks, eliminate the service module thruster issues that we had on docking. While last year's crewed test flight helped validate how astronauts control and operate Starliner, Stick emphasized that a major technical issue with the propulsion system remains unresolved. In January, a NASA Safety Advisory Panel acknowledged that although Boeing and NASA have made significant progress in their post-flight technical investigations, the propulsion system issues are still an urgent concern. To address this, Boeing plans to conduct ground tests on the thruster components this summer to verify their proposed fixes. However, Stick suggested that ground testing alone might not be enough. To fully ensure the thrusters perform as expected in space, another uncrewed test flight could be necessary. So, after more than a decade of failures, can Boeing finally turn things around with this next test flight? Honestly, I think they're serious about making it work, especially with Kelly Ortberg in charge. The guy's got over 35 years of experience in aerospace, so if anyone can get Starliner back on track, it's him. However, this was an additional test flight required for NASA certification, meaning that under the fixed-price contract, Boeing had to cover the entire cost, roughly $400 million, on its own. This wasn't the first time either. Back in 2022, after the failure of OFT-1 in 2019, Boeing had to fund OFT-2 out of pocket, recording a $410 million loss without receiving a single extra dollar from NASA. On top of that, Boeing is already $2 billion over budget trying to fix Starliner's issues, and another test flight won't come cheap. This puts them under serious financial pressure, especially with the spacecraft's already tarnished reputation. NASA, meanwhile, wants Starliner to succeed to maintain redundancy alongside Crew Dragon, but they have no plans to throw in extra funding beyond the current contract. Adding to the pressure is the ticking clock. NASA plans to retire the ISS around 2030, meaning Boeing and NASA have to fast-track Starliner's certification within this shrinking window. If Boeing doesn't act quickly, NASA might not have enough space to fulfill its contract with Starliner. NASA is gearing up for Artemis 2, the first crewed mission of the Artemis program. This mission aims to send 4 astronauts to the Moon's south pole, laying the foundation for a sustainable human presence on the Moon. While Artemis the Sun won't land on the Moon, it will bring humans to its vicinity for the first time since 1972. The core stage for Artemis 2 was transported from Louisiana to NASA last year, and in November, the team began stacking the solid rocket boosters for the Space Launch System. Recently, significant progress has been made, including the installation of solar panels on the Orion spacecraft and the completion of its service module at Kennedy Space Center. The aerodynamic panels are also ready to be jettisoned during launch. Next month, Orion will move to another facility at Kennedy for fueling, then to another building for its launch abort system, before heading to the vehicle assembly building to be stacked on top of the SLS. If we look back at the uncrewed Artemis Way mission in 2022, it took about 8 months to wrap up all these steps before Orion was delivered to the VAB. So, with all the delays over the years, it's understandable if we're a bit skeptical about NASA hitting their target launch date for Artemis 2 in April 2026. Speaking of Artemis, NASA used to tout on their site that Artemis 3 would bring the first woman and first person of color to the Moon. But they've scrapped that now. It happened last 2 weekends when NASA axed their DEIA programs and erased related wording, per Trump's orders. His team slams DEIA as a waste of cash and shameful discrimination. Though it's not clear how ditching those lines might shake up the crew picks for the moon missions, a NASA spokesperson said that, "Don't worry, the change in language doesn't mean we're switching up the crew. Suni and Butch are veteran astronauts with experience on a variety of spacecraft throughout their careers. And on the return of the Crew 9 mission, they just got the first ride on SpaceX's famous Crew Dragon. It delivered an experience unlike anything they'd had before. More space, more comfort, more modern tech. So, what did they experience inside this spacecraft? How does it differ from the others? With around 25 years of experience as astronauts, Sunita Suni Williams and Barry Butch Wilmore have flown on various spacecraft from different countries. Suni has traveled aboard the Space Shuttle STS-116 and Russia's Soyuz TMA-05M, while Butch has flown on STS-129 and Soyuz TMA-14M. More recently, both took part in Boeing's CST-100 Starliner test flight, but this time, it was a whole new experience. Their first time flying home on SpaceX's Crew Dragon after spending over 9 months stuck on the ISS. With touchscreen controls, a sleek design, and full reusability, it's a pretty big shift from the spacecraft they were used to. For example, the difference becomes even clearer when compared to the Soyuz spacecraft. Don Pettit, an astronaut and chemical engineer who flew on Soyuz TMA-03M, once shared with the press, "From the engineering perspective, smaller is better and cheaper to launch. From a crew comfort viewpoint, the Soyuz is cramped. I might even say cramped squared. Once strapped in, my heels are nearly in contact with my butt. I am tied down at 8 points to a form-fitting couch, making it difficult to move anything other than my arms. This feels more like a medieval torture chamber than a rocket cockpit. A tiny space of just 5 cubic meters crammed with 3 astronauts and their bulky protective suits." It's no wonder he'd say something like that. By contrast, Crew Dragon's 9.3 cubic meters, nearly double that, feels like a luxury suite, built for up to 7, but typically hosting 4. On the recent Crew 9 mission, those 4 astronauts seemed right at home, a testament to the roominess. That space comes from Dragon's hefty design, a 16-foot-tall, 13-foot-wide pressurized capsule atop a 12-foot trunk, doubling as power supply and cargo bay. Stepping inside, Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore must have marveled at the difference from Apollo's chaotic, switch-filled cabins, cramped relics they'd never fully decode. Instead of the old control panels filled with switches and buttons, Dragon's cockpit is streamlined and futuristic. Right in front of the crew, there's just a large touchscreen displaying all the critical flight data, position, speed, spacecraft status. If needed, the astronauts can interact with the screen to make adjustments or handle emergencies. But here's the interesting part. Dragon flies completely autonomously. Unless something unusual happens, there's no need for the crew to take manual control. Mission control on the ground handles any adjustments remotely, making it a very different experience from older spacecraft that required hands-on piloting. That doesn't mean astronauts are just passengers, though. If needed, they can override the system using touchscreen controls, a modern shift from the traditional switches and joysticks of the past. But in normal conditions, Dragon runs the show, making spaceflight feel more like riding a smart spaceship than piloting one. Oh, and here's something truly unique about Dragon. Something I bet no other spacecraft, not even Starliner, has: a built-in toilet. SpaceX equipped Dragon with a small vacuum suction toilet tucked near the ceiling of the cabin, right by the hatch from an astronaut's perspective. This system uses suction, fans, and storage tanks to handle waste in microgravity. It's been used on missions like Inspiration 4 and Crew 9, but not without some hiccups, especially when it came to the urine container. During Inspiration 4, a tube connected to the waste storage system came loose, allowing urine to leak into the floor of the capsule. While this didn't cause immediate issues for the crew, it was a concern for long-term missions. A similar issue was later discovered in Crew 2's Dragon after its return, where SpaceX engineers found that the leak had caused corrosion in some areas. By Crew 9, the issue was fully resolved, proving that even in space travel, plumbing problems can't be ignored. This little detail makes a huge difference on long-duration flights, like the 17-hour journey Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore took from the ISS back to Earth, so they don't have to wear those sweaty diapers. Speaking of comfort, some people with claustrophobia say they can't imagine being crammed into a tiny spacecraft in a bulky spacesuit. But here's the thing. SpaceX's IVA suits aren't bulky at all. Unlike the bright orange pumpkin suits from the shuttle era or the stiff Sokol suits of Soyuz, these flight suits are sleek, form-fitting, and look like they're straight out of a sci-fi movie. But it's not just about style. The outer layer is made of Nomex, a fire-resistant material similar to Kevlar, shielding astronauts from fire or sudden cabin depressurization. Inside, a built-in cooling system keeps their body temperature steady throughout the flight. And then there's the game changer, a single umbilical connection. Forget the tangle of tubes and wires, astronauts just plug in one cable and it handles everything. Oxygen supply, temperature control, comms with mission control, and real-time health monitoring. No switches, no fiddling around. As Chris Trigg, SpaceX's crew equipment manager, explains, one of the things that was important in the development of the suit was to make it easy to use, something that the crew just literally has to plug in when they sit down, and the suit takes care of things from there. This focus on comfort and convenience isn't just about luxury, it ties directly to SpaceX's long-term ambitions. While most spacesuits today, like those on the ISS, are made for short-term use in low Earth orbit, SpaceX aims beyond. They're designing for Moon and Mars missions, where suits must endure longer stretches. To make that possible, SpaceX is tackling a range of challenges, making rigorous suit testing a key part of the upcoming 5-day Polaris. One of the most critical aspects? Pressure regulation. Without precise control, astronauts could face serious dangers, something Soviet cosmonaut Alexei Leonov experienced firsthand. In 1965, during the first-ever spacewalk, his EVA suit expanded so much in the vacuum of space that he struggled to fit back into the airlock. With no other choice, he had to manually vent air from his suit just to squeeze inside his spacecraft. It was a terrifying lesson in why spacesuit design matters. All right, that's just a little side story. Let's get back to the Dragon. On the outside, Dragon is wrapped in a heat shield made of Pica X, a SpaceX innovation that improves on NASA's phenolic-impregnated carbon ablator. This material can withstand re-entry temperatures hotter than molten lava, over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, without cracking or melting. Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore didn't feel the slightest bit hot as they splashed down in the Gulf of America, but that heat shield is why Dragon is reusable. Unlike the space shuttle, which needed months of tender, loving care after every mission, Dragon is designed for quick turnarounds, making space travel more routine than ever. Dragon's heat shield might steal the spotlight, but its solar panels are the real unsung heroes. Stretched across the trunk, these sleek black arrays aren't just eye candy. They power everything, from the touchscreen cockpit to the vacuum toilet, soaking up sunlight like a lifeline. While Soyuz stumbles to the ISS on battery packs that fade in 6 hours, a ticking clock, Dragon's solar setup pumps out over 2,000 watt-hours per orbit. That's enough to cruise through Crew 9's 17-hour return with energy to spare. Older designs don't even come close. The space shuttle had solar panels too, but they unfolded like a clunky origami puzzle, eating up space and time. Dragons are built into the trunk, compact, no fuss, no moving parts. Starliner? Its service module has solar cells, but they're puny, dumped before re-entry, and can't haul cargo like Dragon's trunk does. SpaceX didn't just add panels, they crafted a rugged, reusable power system that keeps 4 astronauts comfortable while lugging science gear back to Earth. More importantly, the cost and performance differences are striking. A seat on Crew Dragon runs about $55 million, far more cost-effective than Starliner's hefty $90 million per seat. And while Dragon has already completed 10 official crewed missions to the ISS, Starliner is still waiting for its first certified human flight. Yet, despite Dragon's achievements, including a rescue mission, NASA still favors Starliner, doubling down on its investment without flinching at its skyrocketing costs. Boeing took a $523 million hit on Starliner in 2024, pushing total losses past $2 billion. Their SEC filing blames it on delays, insane testing costs, and pricey post-certification flights, a steep price for a ship that hasn't even started regular crew missions. Still, NASA isn't backing down. Instead, they're pushing for another flight, determined to get Starliner into the rotation. Right after Crew Dragon wrapped up its Crew 9 mission, NASA made it clear they're still sticking with Starliner. During a press conference, Steve Stick, head of NASA's Commercial Crew Program, confirmed that another test flight is planned before Starliner can start crew rotation missions. "What we'd like to do is that one flight and then get into a crew rotation flight," he said. "So, the next flight up would really test all the changes we're making to the vehicle, and then the next flight beyond that, we really need to get Boeing into a crew rotation. So, that's the strategy." The upcoming test flight might be uncrewed, but NASA wants to make sure Starliner is fully capable of carrying astronauts. As Steve Stish put it, even if we fly it back without a crew, we still want it to be crew capable. So we want all the systems in place that would allow us to fly with a crew. It's clear why NASA's sticking with this. They're giving Starliner a shot to prove itself, diversifying their options, and leaning on Boeing's long aerospace legacy. It's a smart play, even if the cash keeps pouring out. Still, Dragon's out there, quietly racking up wins with every mission. NASA's trust in Starliner isn't misplaced, it's pragmatic. But Dragon's steady reliability raises a question. Are they putting their chips on the right contender? Especially when it's assigned to massive missions. Coming up on March 31st, 2025, the Dragon resilient spacecraft will lift off from Launch Pad 39A in Florida, carrying out the FRAM-2 mission, the first crewed flight over Earth's polar orbit. It's the first human spaceflight to sweep over Earth's polar regions in low Earth orbit. Unlike most missions hugging lower latitudes, this one charts a daring course above the poles, a route crewed spacecraft rarely tackle. For one, it opens up new research in microgravity, like offering a fresh perspective on Earth's climate from a rarely seen vantage point. It also marks another milestone for Dragon, proving it can take on complex missions no other U.S. commercial spacecraft has attempted. But FRAM-2 isn't just about pushing boundaries in orbit, it's also changing how Dragon comes home. This mission is set to be the first crew Dragon flight that won't splash down off Florida's coast, as SpaceX shifts recovery operations to the West Coast. The change is designed to better control the descent of the trunk, the unpressurized module that separates from the spacecraft and re-enters Earth's atmosphere. With Crew 9's recent return, it's possible we've seen the last Crew Dragon splash down off Florida's coast, as SpaceX plans to shift future recoveries to the Pacific. Meanwhile, NASA has yet to confirm the timing of Crew 11's rescue mission, but it will likely rely on SpaceX once again. Boeing's Starliner remains stuck in certification hurdles, with ongoing technical and safety issues pushing its first operational crew rotation further down the road, possibly until 2026. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in.